Tax increases are sparking concern among residents.
Well, obviously that's bad.
What's happening with all our tax dollars?
Hearing from homeowners who say they're seeing 100 to 200% increases on their property taxes this year.
Aren't we supposed to get better services as they increase?
What's driving the increases and what's at stake?
Because right now, those services are declining despite taxes rising.
There has never been as much wealth or prosperity, and local governments around the state are struggling to really complete basic functions.
Why is there such a disconnect between what we see and what we hear?
There has to be a better way for us to make sense of what's going on here. But the thought of sifting through pages of budget and tax documents sounds far from ideal.
This is so boring.
And then I had this crazy idea. What if we looked at our city budgets in a different way, so we could see if we're spending the right amount on important services more easily? That should definitely provide some guidance for us to shape our cities better. Similar to how most of us break down our personal budgets at home, the city breaks down how much they make and spend during the year. But as cities struggle to upkeep services available to us, I can't help but ask myself,
Is it gonna be like this forever?
It does not tell us anything about whether we can continue to do this forever. And the operating statement, the operating budget, the P&L, does not contain those answers. Those answers live in a completely different place. They live in the balance sheet.
I took a class on this in college, but I almost failed it.
Your balance sheet is telling you about not only your entire financial past, but it's also telling you about your financial future. Everything that you will see from now on is based on this. It all comes from this fact that all cash comes from your operating budget at some point.
Operating budget. We'll figure that out later.
I have 3 main goals for this video. 1, I want to understand how cities balance their budgets currently, because that's currently a mystery to me.
But of course, keeping their book is much more complicated.
2, I want to understand where our taxes are going, because having to pay them and then not seeing where they end up is frustrating.
Don't make a ton of money.
And 3, I would love to find a way for city budgets to more clearly communicate what's going on with our money in government, because I don't want to have to sift through thousands or hundreds of pages of documents just to have a better understanding of why taxes are rising or where our money is being spent. But given my limited accounting skills, let's see what Chuck has to say about where cities can start.
Last summer, we got a dozen people from around the country together, elected leaders, some journalists, some finance officers, and then some people who are consultants who work in city finance. The topic was, what can we pull out of city budgets that would help people understand what was going on in their budget? Michel Duran-Wood had the thing that was like the breakthrough. He presented to us this analysis that came from the organization that makes recommendations to cities on how they should do their finances. That organization recommended that cities track these metrics every year and report on them. And so his city, Winnipeg, started tracking them.
So after that meeting, I set out to find time to talk with Michel.
So I'm about to get on the phone with Michel. I'm hoping he provides a little bit more direction on how these indicators that I guess were recommended by the Canadian government can help us better understand our city finances.
So in Canada, there's the Public Sector Accounting Board, which is a governing body of the Certified Professional Accountants Association of Canada, and they determine the public sector accounting standards. So those recommended practices came out in like 2009, so they're not new. The numbers we're looking for these metrics is like, if you're looking for 10 or 12 different numbers, you should be able to find this information almost everywhere. These are meant to be a starting point for like, where do you dig deeper? And my city actually did start to use some of them immediately in 2009. Talked about them again in 2010 and then again in 2011. And then they sort of just disappeared. Like no fanfare, just gone. I don't want to like say it was malicious or anything, like who knows why, but it just seems suspicious.
Everything that you will see from now on is based on this, that all cash comes from your operating budget at some point.
Hey everyone, I'm currently on a walk. I feel like I needed to get out of the house and just think about this video a bit. I feel like I'm a bit of an imposter trying to make a video about city finances when I have no experience myself with city finances. Up to this point, it's been like quite a difficult decision to try and make, whether it's worth trying to learn how to balance a budget or not, just because it seems so like difficult and out of reach. You know what? Maybe it's just time to do it.
To those of you who are new to public budgeting, it's a little different than what you've done in your businesses.
It captures the city's priorities. It explains where the money comes from and how we will spend it. It outlines the ways we will provide services, and it communicates information to City Council and you, our residents.
Is made up of different funds that track and balance revenues and expenses for a variety of city services.
The budget is the way that you get to show your community what your priorities are.
Okay, this woman, Carrie, brings up some really nice points. We really can't get anything done in our cities unless we move money around in the budget. The money that allows cities to do things comes from our taxes. So this is currently how those taxes are being tracked right now.
We know how to budget our household budgets. Whatever we save today can be put towards anything we want in the future. But represented on a balance sheet, the goal here is to have the sum of both columns equal to 0. Except our savings in this case remains in expenses. So instead of just calling that a general savings fund, the balance sheet encourages us to assign those savings to future purchases. However, in a government balance sheet, this savings is known as the operating budget, aka the city's financial plan for paying for its daily services, which is paid for by our taxes. And since I'm doing all of this to better understand how city budgets help shape better cities, I went back to Chuck to see if he could provide more information on where our money is actually going.
Local budgets are really opaque. They are transparent in the sense that they release a ton of information, but they are opaque in the sense that like it's hard to tell what that information is or what it means, and it's not really presented in like a discernible way. And let me back up and make sure that we're all on the same page with that. Cities do cash budgeting. So they literally once a year sit down and say, all right, what money are we planning to bring in next year? Let's spend that money. It would be as if, you said, okay, what money do I have coming in my next paycheck? All right, let's spend that money. But you didn't really think about like if you were gonna save anything or if you had a mortgage. And this leads to like really, really bad policies, where cities at the end of the year are basically trying to balance their budget, not all that worried about the implications in future years. That's not to say people don't care, and that's not to say they don't want to do the right thing, but the incentives are really, really stacked to focus on today, even if it comes at the expense of making things a little bit harder tomorrow.
But what does that mean?
Okay, what I'm learning is the current way we speak about our budget is really just focused on our ability to pay off our own debts during one fiscal year, the current fiscal year. And the problem with this is it's not giving us a clear picture of if our cities are able to pay off our debts 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. We're starting to see the impact of not understanding what the trajectory of our city's financial state is. And that's where these graphs come into play, because they're supposed to give us a better understanding of our city's trends, not just if our cities are able to pay off their debts this year.
But there's also still one big problem. I have no idea where to start with these graphs. This is Linda. She's Strongtown's controller, which means she knows numbers way better than I ever will. And although she's not an expert in this stuff, she's been working closely with this information to help our team get a clearer read on different cities' financial health.
I started by just Googling ACFR, which is the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. This is a massive document, but we're only interested in this dozen or so line
numbers,
items.
Right.
There's a section of the report that's called Management Discussion and Analysis, the MD&A. The report is called Net Position. These first 5 line items are going to come from this one report. These reports are presented in whole dollars. Some entities will note that information is presented in thousands, or I've come across some for very large places where it's rounded to millions. Just be aware of that when pulling information.
Sorry, just quickly, this table is located pretty much on the same page of every financial document going back.
It's not going to be the same page number.
I took a class on this in college, but I almost failed it.
So from this report, we're going to pull, first of all, total revenues. These next two lines, they're represented on the second and third detailed lines under total program revenue. So there's one more number that we're going to pull from the income statement, which is the interest charges. Another line here, which is your net book total capital assets.
I began to feel overwhelmed by all the technical terms being thrown around. A reminder of how I've never done anything like this before, and insecurity started to set in about whether I'd be able to explain this to others in a video.
This section is a little bit more ambiguous, especially from one organization to another. From here, we're going to be pulling just basically 4 numbers.
As Linda explained where to find these last few numbers, I began to realize something.
The total capital assets not being depreciated, the total capital assets that are being depreciated from the government activities and business type activities. And that's it. We've entered all the data we need for 2024. We've got our indicator ratios populated. And if we look at our graphs now, we have trend lines.
Even though I may not fully grasp every concept that we talked about yet, this is the first time I've had a real conversation that helped me make sense of what's going on in a city budget. So yesterday I spoke with Linda about the graphs, and this morning I wanted to go on a walk to think about everything that she talked about before diving into it today. And I'm honestly feeling pretty good about how things were explained to me, what the graphs mean, or at least how to get them. There's just one thing that I still don't think I understand very well, and that's why Winnipeg stopped using these in the first place. Up to now, I haven't really tried analyzing these graphs on my own, so I figured why not take a look at Winnipeg's and see if I can figure out why they decided to stop using these graphs. Okay, so Winnipeg's net financial position started at 0 and is going, whoa. This is not looking good. Total assets to total liabilities, what is that? And this is a ratio. It does have more total assets than it does liabilities, but the slope kind of trending downwards also suggests that it's being financed more by debt than it is by a surplus. And the net debt to total revenues graph tells us that the city makes enough money to cover half of its debt, about $3.64 billion. With the outcome of these first graphs showing that Winnipeg's financial situation is not sustainable, I quickly began to realize why the city slowly started to fade out the use of these. Let's see what else we've got here. Interest to total revenue. This tracks the percentage of a city's revenue that goes towards paying interest. The higher this percentage is, the less flexibility the city has to allocate funds towards critical services and new investments. Since Winnipeg's interest payments are going down, it means the city is either paying off debts or getting better loan deals with lower interest rates. All right, this is not doing terribly. But when we compare this to the fact that the value of its infrastructure is also going down, it shows that roads, buildings, and other important structures are getting older and not being fixed. I continued onward, hoping that the last graph would paint a different story. All right, what is the vulnerability indicator again? I believe what this one is about. Government transfers to total revenues. Yeah, this feels straightforward. Government transfers is fiat type funds, and total revenues is how much the city makes year to year. AKA, if that federal money were to be reallocated somewhere else, Winnipeg is losing potentially 20% of its revenue source for the year. So our tax dollars go to paying off debt predominantly because they don't have enough money to meet our annual budget needs. As I watched the trend line for Winnipeg's dependency on federal funding move upwards, I felt nervous.
This is not because of bad Democratic politicians running cities and selfish, greedy people who won't pay enough taxes and businesses that are getting tax cuts at the local level. This is because at the end of World War II, we turned cities into growth machines. Whenever we have a recession, whenever we have a downturn, we pump money into cities and we tell them to grow, because that's how we're going to make GDP go up next quarter. In exchange for this, we tell cities to take on all these promises and all these liabilities that they can't meet.
Tonight, more evidence that the nation's infrastructure is crumbling.
And so what we have handed the current generation of leaders is a ton of promises.
And a mayor announcing a multi-billion-dollar investment in the city's water infrastructure.
The money will go toward replacing hundreds of miles of pipe that are well past their useful life.
That they can't solve with the current model. Therefore, what we are pointing out with these charts is that we need a different model.
As Chuck's words rang through my head, I thought,
is this happening anywhere else? So here's a list of the 4 cities that I want to analyze a bit based off of their population size and their geographic location. I think they give a wide variety of different types of towns and cities. So I'm going to try and answer those 3 questions that I was trying to answer for Winnipeg. But the only problem is I need to turn this in on March 31st so that we can get this video out to you guys by April 4th. And today is March 28th. So yeah, I got a lot of work to do, but this feels really important.
So I dove right in.
And I think the most important thing to notice is that this is a long-term trend. This is structural. This didn't just happen in the last 4 years or 5 years or 10 years. We're looking at 2 decades and it's just a steady downward thing.
We have a lot of data now and a lot of different cities. And with very few exceptions, they all show the same thing. We've been making this case, we've been saying this, that cities are functionally insolvent. What this data shows is that almost all cities that we've looked at, and we've looked at dozens now, are functionally insolvent. It's not close. They have way more liabilities than they do assets.
There's a lot of nuance in these graphs we can't cover here today. But if you want to learn more, sign up for updates in the description so that you can figure out what's going on with your city.
Okay, excuse the lighting, it's kind of late. I just wanted to hop on here because I don't know why I feel like I came into this kind of thinking that if we do this analysis, we'll have more of a straightforward path for what to do to get out of it. And I'm trying my best to break this down in a way that doesn't feel boring or discouraging even, but I think even I'm looking at this information and it's tough to just get excited about it. And it's kind of scary to think that if you're a concerned citizen bringing this to council, or if you're a council member yourself, that you're probably going to get pushback if you bring this up. So yeah, naturally, of course, who wants that? No one wants that level of conflict in their life. But then at the same time, it's if we don't address this, we're all worse off. We're already down that path.
Even if we start doing everything right today, it's still going to get worse before it gets better. They tell you the best time to plant a tree was 50 years ago. The next best time is now. It won't be fixed, but the outcomes will be better if we do things right starting now.
My name is David M. Jenkins.
Nathan Harlett.
My name is Warren Waters.
I'm currently a town council member from the town of La Plata, Maryland.
I live in Ottawa, as you said.
I live in Calgary. Lived here all my life. Hope that it can be a good place for people long after I'm gone.
What about Ottawa's graphs was giving you red flags?
Well, our debt is increasing. We're relying more on our future revenue to pay for past liabilities.
Financial position has gone up since 2011, but it looks like our infrastructure numbers have gone down since then. What does that mean in terms of real terms? Last year we had a feeder main break. It was expected to last 100 years. It lasted about 50 years.
In the town of La Plata, the trends are fairly positive. I mean, they're not bad and they're not good.
We have a high credit rating. Well, that just means that people are willing to buy our debt because they know that we can't default on the debt, so we're a good credit risk. But that just means that we can go deeper and deeper into debt. Doesn't change the facts.
David, Nathan, and Warren were confirming my suspicions. Have you brought these graphs to those members? Are they interested in using it?
Not directly, no, I have not.
In Canada, municipalities aren't allowed to have operating deficits. But as you can see on the balance sheet, it doesn't matter if you have operating surpluses every year, you can still go broke.
Cities often trumpet things like their credit score. At best, those things indicate that they are going through the process that has been set up competently, but it does not mean that their budget is actually good.
No one wants that level of conflict in their life.
Actually, I should do that, particularly now.
I managed to get my counselor to at least ask the chief financial officer to meet with
There are counselors who are interested in it and are pushing for understanding it better.
Getting people to look at city budgets in a different way is going to be a challenge. But I noticed that there was a common theme that everyone I talked to shared.
I'm not trying to be critical. That's the important thing, is to keep it positive. I'm just curious what's going on and what's causing it and what can we do about it.
An opportunity to help us understand our city budgets better.
If we make it clear enough that every resident understands, then hopefully that helps every counselor understand as well.
And more clearly advocate for where we want our tax dollars to be spent.
One size doesn't fit all, but there are best practices that maybe why don't we look at this?
Because 70 years ago may have been the best time to start doing these assessments.
Somebody should do it. I have a little time. I could be a somebody and I could do that.
But the next best time is now.
8,500 people. That's the amount of members that Strong Towns wants to have by the end of this year. But I think that we can blow that number out of the water. If you're here right now, chances are you dream of a world where every town is financially resilient and designed for people. And by becoming a member, you join a growing network of others who are helping to drive that change. Because if we exceed our membership goals for this year, then every town will have no choice but to reconsider the development pattern they've been using for the past 60 years. If you're interested, the link's in the description, and I'll see you soon.